Hello and welcome along. It's Kathy Frey here from IMCO, from the International Integrative Maternity Healthcare Organisation. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to have back again one of my favourite topics. And welcome along, Tasha. Say hello.
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, we could chat for hours, and I think we nearly did off air. We nearly missed the timing because we just can chat on this topic for so long.
Yeah, we can chat on this topic for so long. It's just it's what IMCO, it sort of sums up what IMCO is all about. And yeah, so very exciting. But Tasha, just to sort of give everybody a little bit of an overview, so Tasha is a fertility naturopath, and she helps proactive women and couples improve their fertility and well-being to create that healthy pregnancy and healthy babies. But one of the things that we were talking about in the green room before we went live is the issue that so often, and the couples today who are actively trying to conceive haven't even thought about preconception healthcare. It's not until it goes into that infertility, subfertility situation that then they start to reach out. So I'm going to get Tasha to introduce herself properly to you, and she's going to be talking about those three really big influential parts of where we of the journey that the DNA in our children is influenced, and that's preconception, health of the ovum, health of the sperm, pregnancy, what's going on there, particularly micronutritionally for the woman, and breastfeeding. These are three big times. But I'm gonna I just want to tell a quick story before we get started, because I think it's really interesting. But I've been a midwife a while now, and I do recall in my training that we had absolutely no conversations at all around this topic. And in all those years at university, we never talked about naturopathic wellness. And at that point, I was already aware of it because I'd been through the journey myself from an infertility, subfertility. So I already knew. But I kind of got to the end of this course and thought, gee, that's fascinating that it's never been discussed. And right at the very end, the very last assignment everybody had to do was a teaching session where we as a student were teaching the class a particular topic. And a lovely student by the name of Vanessa did this awesome job talking about preconception healthcare.
Brilliant.
It was absolutely, everybody was glued listening because nobody knew anything.
Yeah.
The tutors, the midwifery tutors didn't know, let alone the midwifery students. This is new information. This is cutting edge information. We're able to study things in a way that we weren't able to do, that not that many decades ago. And so it's a very exciting area of science. And and at the moment you're on this pilgrimage to try and educate people, as we are here at IMCO.
Yeah.
We can see that at some point there's going to be this change where it becomes commonplace and common knowledge, and it's not something that only those who suffer from infertility and subfertility problems then become aware of in their journey of trying to fix that fertility. It's wonderful to have you here again, and I'm going to hand over to you, and Tasha's got a PowerPoint that she's going to be going through. And of course, for those of you who are live here today, don't hesitate to go into the Q&A section and put any questions through that you may want answered. But otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Tasha.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you for this opportunity. I think we definitely on the same wavelength in what you're trying to achieve with IMCO, and the word I'm trying to spread in regards to, I guess, preconception, pregnancy, and breastfeeding. We have this amazing window of opportunity to improve the health of the future generation, and I would even go further than that. We have this responsibility to do that. And yet, as you said, look, obstetricians, fertility specialists are my main referrals. which is fantastic because they don't learn about it. I'm married to a specialist. He's a cardiologist, so very separate, but they don't get training in wellness. They're amazing at treating disease, and I want to be on his table if I have a heart issue, but I'd rather prevent that if we can. And
isn't it? And we talked about that just before going live. Is that whole thing that our obstetricians, our midwives are normal specialists, and our obstetricians are abnormal specialists. Our OBGYNs, so their knowledge is all around pathology. If something's not right, that's who we should be seeing. But their knowledge on wellness is there's almost none, and the tools in their toolbox are so limited. What, clomiphene, IVF, IUI, like what else have they? What other options have they got? So it is super exciting, the fact that your dominant referrers now are fertility specializing obstetricians.
I love that. And as you're saying, I can feel the shift. I can feel the shift.
Start to feel that shift. We just want to get women aware, and couples aware of this information before they hit a fertility.
I would love to see them before they have 7 failed cycles, and then they send them to me to try and fix and improve things. But it's a start.
Yeah, it's a start. So it's still a miraculous thing that has now become your dominant referrer. That's
and I love working with the medical professions. I have my whole career, and everyone says, how are you a naturopath married to a doctor? I'm like, we're meant to work together. I love working with IVF specialists. If you've got blocked tubes or there's some functional issue, IVF can provide you with a baby that otherwise wouldn't be possible. This is fascinating and amazing technology, but it's only as good as the egg and sperm we provide and the nourishment we provide to that child. So I'll share my screen here and get started on this topic I am super, super passionate about, which is nourishing our infant's DNA for that best start in life. And as I've said, we have this amazing opportunity during this preconception period and pregnancy and breastfeeding to enhance the DNA we are passing on to our future child and the future generation. And I'm probably a little biased, but in this preconception period, I find it absolutely fascinating that we can actually improve the health of that egg and sperm that we pass on to our future baby. So it is 90 days before we conceive that precious egg and sperm start developing. So that's when preconception care really needs to start. And that's where we can have this opportunity to improve that growth. They start as these primordial follicles and they start to develop and grow. And by optimizing the environment in which they are growing, we have the opportunity to improve the health of the egg, health of the sperm. That improves our chances of conceiving, yes, which is the main thing that my IVF specialists who refer to me are trying to achieve. But my job, I feel my responsibility goes beyond that. I don't want to just get you pregnant. I want you to have this healthy pregnancy and this healthy journey and this healthy postpartum, healthy baby at the other end. And it all starts 90 days before you conceive. So anyone who's wanting to conceive, their journey to, of nourishing their future baby starts now. Not when you fall pregnant, because we now know, particularly as we get older, it's not so much that we have older eggs. And I think I have women come to me and say, well, I'm older or I have old eggs. It's not so much we have old eggs. It's the fact that they are developing in an older body. So what can we do to optimize that? And as we were talking about before, specialists are great. They look at the pathology. They'll tell you if you have deficiency or diseases, and most people don't. And that's why they're referred to me, because they're unexplained infertility. And I'll put that, in brackets, unexplained, because all their test results are fine. There's nothing, no disease, there's no pathology, there's no deficiency. But when we're wanting to conceive, particularly as we get older, and look, biologically, we should be having, babies in our early 20s, but we're not doing that anymore. Most of my patients are in their late 30s, 40s. So we really want to get everything in the optimal range. And that's what I'm trying to achieve for my patients, not just the absence of deficiency and disease, but optimal health. So this is what we can do in the preconception period. And then during pregnancy, your bub is never going to grow as quickly as they do, within the first 10 weeks. We have all the organs formed. I find it absolutely amazing that these two different cells from two different bodies can come together and create a new life, start a new heart beating. And this development is so rapid and it needs the building blocks to go along with it. And then during breastfeeding, this is often, I think, an under-recognized time when you are still the sole source of nutrition for this growing baby. So it's actually more nutritionally demanding than pregnancy, because you're fueling the growth of this now quite big infant. You're also dealing with sleep and all of those things that go along with having that newborn. So the breastfeeding time is, again, another critical time where we can support this development. And what you do now sets the foundations for the best start in life. So I'm going to go through what we can do, and I guess also talk about a little bit about why I wanted to talk to you about this today. So I'm a fertility naturopath, and I help proactive women and couples improve their fertility well-being to create healthy pregnancies and healthy babies. And I've been a naturopath for over 20 years now. I just looked the other day, 23 years, scarily. And I do work closely with leading IVF specialists and fertility clinics, helping their patients create their healthy pregnancies, which is a relationship I really love. IVF is an amazing technology, but it's only as good as the raw materials that we provide them. And so I think empowering couples to be able to go hand in hand with their IVF specialist and improve what they're passing on is a really exciting thing that they can do. I'm the author of the Fertility Diet and the Vitamins Guide, which has now got 2 volumes now, and they're sold across Australia, the US, the UK, and Canada. I'm host of the Conceive Baby podcast, which is something I absolutely love. And I interview a lot of obstetricians, fertility specialists, and researchers, which is really where it all developed when I was wanting to find out all the nutrients to create my prenatal supplement, Zycia Natal Nutrients, which is a company I developed when I was trying to conceive and we were struggling. I had a background in product development for a big pharmaceutical chain. I did their home brand vitamin range, and I really wanted something that contained all the nutrients that I wanted for my future baby. And this is how Zycia was conceived. And the Conceive Baby podcast really flowed on from that, because I was scrolling through PubMed. I was looking at all the research, and I was going beyond that. And I was emailing the researchers and saying, why did you use this nutrient? Why did you use this dose? And I was really heartened by the responses I was receiving, and I wanted to share this information beyond a medical journal. So I began the Conceive Baby podcast to help them share their information. I also love spreading the word beyond that, and I've been asked for expert comment on a load of media publications. I had the pleasure of being asked for expert comment on the 2 royal pregnancies, Kate's and Meghan's. And I just think what we're doing today and what you can do for the women that you and couples that you're dealing with is really something that we can support the health of our future generation. So we're talking about nourishing the infant's DNA, and we're nourishing the infant's DNA, as I said, before this infant is even conceived, before it's even an embryo. And there are 5 key aspects that I'm going to cover and how we go about that. And I love that, it's the 5 fingers, and there's 5 key aspects, fits nicely in the palm of the hand there. So the first one I'm going to talk about that we need to nourish this DNA is energy. We need to provide sufficient fuel to help with energy production. So it really comes back to The mitochondria, we think back to our biology classes, it's that energy powerhouse of our cell, because it needs a ton of energy. As I said, for these two cells to come together, for all the chromosomes to line up correctly and create that new life, requires a ton of energy. In fact, in humans, the mature egg cell or oocyte contains the highest number of mitochondria among human cells, ranging from 100,000 to 600,000 mitochondria per cell. So in human embryonic development, the number of these mitochondria and the content of that mitochondrial DNA within each mitochondrion and the subsequent mitochondrial activity affects the production of oocytes, fertilization of those oocytes, and early embryonic growth and development. So basically, the amount of those mitochondria and how well they're functioning affects our egg quality, affects our ability to fertilize, affects the ability for all those chromosomes to line up correctly and for that embryo to grow and develop. So we need a ton of energy. And they contain the most of any cell because they have this high demand for energy. And this is something we need particularly mindful as we get older to fuel this energy, because this is probably one of the number one things that I see in my older patients is we just don't have this energy available, and this is where we end up with chromosomal abnormalities and difficult miscarriages, difficulty conceiving. Because these mitochondria fuel the energy that it's needed to help all these chromosomes line up correctly in the egg and the sperm. So we want that chromosomally normal embryo that's going to be able to go on to create a healthy baby, because not all of the eggs that we release at ovulation are going to be viable. So we need to stack the odds in our favor to be able to support that development and get all those chromosomes to line up correctly and provide all that amazing energy that's needed to start that new heart beating. We need to aid the fertilization process, which is, again, that fascinating time where two different cells from two different bodies collide and start this new life, this new heart beating. I find that absolutely fascinating and requires a ton of energy to do that. It supports that blastocyst formation and that healthy growth beyond that fertilization process. So we may get fertilization happening, and I often see this, that the embryo won't continue to grow into that blastocyst. And it's really important to note, I love speaking with the embryologist when I'm dealing with an IVF patient, and I want to know the details. If the egg fertilized, when did it stop growing? If we're having trouble with that continuing growth and getting to day 3 or 5 or 6, we want to see if it's dropping off on day 3. Day 3 is when the egg cell basically looks after all of the growth and development from the fertilization, and it really supports all that development until about day 3 is when the sperm starts to give a helping hand. So if I see embryos dropping off on day 3, if we've spoken to the embryologist and day 3 seems to be when they just stop growing, then we want to look at sperm health particularly, because that's when sperm provides that helping hand. So we want energy in both men and women to provide that healthy blastocyst formation to be able to go on to create that healthy embryo and healthy pregnancy. So it supports that implantation, and that very early embryonic development is requiring a load of energy from us and from the egg and from the sperm within that mitochondria to help with that growth and development. It helps to optimize epigenetic changes within the DNA, and I find this absolutely exciting and fascinating, because the epigenetic changes are, I guess, the way our genes are expressed and the way our DNA is expressed, and that is the most important thing. Epigenetics is when, diseases can be switched on and off. We can actually improve the messages that our DNA is sending. So we have this opportunity, and it needs that, again, fuel, that energy. It, of course, supports the progression of that healthy pregnancy, and also during breastfeeding. when we have that huge nutritional demand, if we've set the foundations right, and that's why I say to my patients, I want to fill your tank. We're about to run a marathon. Even more than a marathon, we're creating another human being. I want that tank really full so that we can fuel that right the way through and nourish that right the way through postpartum and breastfeeding as well. So the next one I want to look at, so we've looked at energy and how important that mitochondrial energy is. We want to look at that DNA development, because this is something that is growing at a rapid rate. We need to provide the right building blocks to support that healthy DNA development. This needs those building blocks from us to be able to grow correctly. We need all those chromosomes to line up. We want this to be a healthy, viable embryo to be able to go on to create that healthy baby. So our DNA, as you know, provides the genetic instructions to all living beings. They tell them how to develop and live and reproduce. It's basically like that little blueprint that we have. And the genes are our segment of our DNA that makes us, basically. And it's the expression of these genes. So like we're talking about the epigenetics, the way these genes are expressed refers to the process where information from a gene's DNA sequence is translated into a substance. So it's the instructions that it's used in a cell's structure or function. So this is how our DNA is telling our body to reproduce. That's why we're looking at the sperm. The sperm cell has a blueprint on which it keeps printing all these new sperm to make. And so how good is that blueprint? Is it making photocopies of these sperm that are unfortunately, aren't intact, and there's fragmentation in that DNA? Because we can be producing billions of sperm, but if that blueprint, if that messaging, if that recipe isn't good, then we're not going to be creating great sperm. So we really need to look at how we are actually, our epigenetic changes are actually sending those signals. We don't want Chinese whispers and it being lost along the way. We've got a good, solid recipe. And the good news is that we can influence this. We can positively or negatively, I like to note, influence the way our genes are expressed by the fuel that we provide. So what we are putting into our body can impact the way our genes are expressed, and this recipe that we're providing to tell the body how to grow, how to repair, how to create egg, sperm, blastocyst, embryo, and healthy baby. And this was a study called Feed Your Genes. So how your genes respond to the food we eat. And fascinatingly, it took just 6 days to change the gene expression of each of the volunteers. So this, I think that we kind of think this is a long process. And yes, I like to work with my patients over the 90 days, ideally, but I think this is an amazing window of opportunity that within 6 days of changing these people's diet, we were able to influence their genetics, the way that their body was telling them to reproduce and grow. So it doesn't need to take a long time. We can make significant changes really quickly, particularly in regards to sperm health. And I always love working with a partner if we've got that, because they're producing a whole new batch of sperm every 90 days. So we can have a significant impact quite quickly with that. So we want to look at antioxidants. We want to protect that egg, sperm, embryo, and that growing baby from environmental influences, particularly in today's day and age. So we want to be looking at these beautiful colours and what we're fueling within our diet to be able to protect this growing embryo. And especially as we get older, again, antioxidants are particularly important in this reproductive process. The egg, sperm, embryo, and growing baby are highly susceptible to environmental influences, and I'll go over that in a bit more detail in a moment. But they are a very fragile thing. They're tiny. What may not affect us may affect the growth and development of these tiny, precious, egg, sperm, and growing baby. So we need to help protect that with these antioxidants. Antioxidants protect the egg, sperm, embryo from negative environmental influences. And I love this study that showed an improvement in pregnancy rate after antioxidant therapy ranged in studies from 11% to 41%. Now, I know if there was an IVF add-on that had that kind of success rate, that people pay thousands for it, and yet it's something as simple as what they can do within their diet to improve that outcome. So this makes a significant difference. So the other thing I want to talk about, so the fourth thing here, is the health of our cells. The cells aren't functionally optimally. And I see this often because I want to look at this here. These two cells have the same raw materials. They are, for all intents and purposes, exactly the same. But as you can see, one kind of looks like a sultana and shriveled up, and one looks like this healthy, juicy grape. And I can see, which one are we going to be wanting? But when we're looking at deficiency or disease, we can still have this unhealthy cell. It's not functionally optimally. It has all the raw materials, so we're not seeing anything wrong on a blood test or any pathology, but it's not doing great. We want to be looking at, getting the right fats and having that nice, healthy cell wall. We want to be supporting detoxification pathways so it's not getting stuck, that there is this beautiful flow. We want the right electrolyte balance to be supporting that nice hydration of movement in and out. So we want to support the cellular health at a cellular level. And the fourth one I want to look at is the environment. So the fifth one, actually, I think I'm up to 5. I've got 4 there. We want to optimize that internal environment in which that egg, sperm, and embryo are developing, because this is an opportunity we have to improve that DNA we are passing on. And we know that it is influenced by the environment within our body, which is again influenced by the external environment in which that egg, sperm, and baby are developing. And this goes for breastfeeding as well, because we're still fueling that internal environment, is fueling that milk production. So we need to support that. And I like these study results that showed that we emphasize the importance of developmental stage, and in particular, the realization that exposure to a presumptive safe dose of chemical may impact a life stage where there is normally no endogenous hormone exposure, thereby underscoring the potential for very low dose EDC or endocrine disrupting chemical exposure to have potent and irreversible effects. So I think that this is something really important to note, that, it's not just toxic levels of these chemicals. We are talking about teeny, tiny, microscopic cells that are rapidly growing into a new human being. So they may be okay, in inverted commas, for us. We were able to pass them through and send them out the other side, but they may have potentially irreversible effects on the growth and development. So we really need to be mindful of what our environmental influences outside of us and how they're influencing that internal environment and that all-important growth and development that is happening in all of these 3 preconception, pregnancy, and breastfeeding stages. So what do we do? What do we do when we're talking about all these aspects? How do we best optimize what we're doing, optimize this DNA that we're passing on to our future baby? And amazingly, we do this through fuel. So what we are fueling our body with is helping to support that energy production. It's providing the fuel to support that energy. It's providing the building blocks to help us create that beautiful, healthy DNA. It's providing antioxidants to protect this all-important growth and development that's happening. it's improving our cellular health. It's helping to make our cells look like those nice juicy grapes rather than those shriveled sultanas. And it's helping to support that optimal environment. And I find it really funny that, I often use the car analogy, that we wouldn't put, really poor quality petrol or even water in our petrol tank of our car and expect it to fire on all cylinders. Or it's probably more electric these days, but we wouldn't plug it in. We wouldn't try some double A's on our electric car and expect it to run well. But for some reason, we do with our bodies. There is this presumption that it doesn't really matter what I put into my body of how well I'm feeling and how well my cells are functioning, but it does matter at a fundamental level. And the reality is, I can trade in my car if I really want to. It's not ideal. But I can trade in my car. We can't trade in this body. It's the only one we have. And what we are fueling it with is fueling the health of the next generation. In fact, 2 generations. And why I say 2 generations is because if you've got a baby girl there, the eggs, all of the eggs that she is going to be born with are developing inside you. So we are affecting her health and her development, and we're also influencing the health of the eggs that she already has within her body. So there are 2 generations that we are fueling. And as I said earlier, we have this amazing window of opportunity during these 3 important periods to nourish that growth and development. And again, I'll go beyond that. I think we have this responsibility within these windows to look at the fuel we are putting in that can have these amazing benefits. And I think, getting professional advice around this, and as I was chatting with Kathy off air, getting this wellness support. You've got your obstetrics, you've got your IVF, and I love working with them. They do amazing work. But we want to be looking at the wellness side of things as well. And I think there is this perception that we can Google stuff like that. But I'm sure I could, go back to that car analogy. I'm pretty handy. I used to ride motorbikes when I was a kid. I used to change the carburetor and clean it out and put it back together again. And I'm sure I could YouTube a clip on how to service my car. But I don't do that because my car is too important to me. I need to get my kids around. I have places to be. So I go to a professional to get it properly serviced and looked after so it doesn't break down. So it is reliable. But for some reason, we think we don't do that for our bodies. We don't get that professional support to be able to look at the fuel and get that service of our bodies and make sure we are functioning optimally. So the fuel we provide is fundamentally important for our next generation. So now I'm going to cover, so actually this another study quoted, you can see I love scrolling through PubMed, but maternal nutrient intake can affect every major aspect of reproduction from the early periconception period to the later postnatal stages. In essence, maternal nutrient status influences the entire range of maternal functions, from the ability to conceive and then to maintain a healthy pregnancy. I'll go beyond that into the postnatal stages as well. So this is how important this fuel is. And there are loads of aspects that I cover. I run a Your Fertile Pantry program that I'm actually running at the moment. I run twice a year, which covers all of the aspects that are involved in creating this healthy DNA to improve chances of conceiving, improve chances of creating a healthy pregnancy and postpartum health. And I'll focus on one today, and I'll stick with the 5 theme. I'll cover key nutrients, because this is something fundamental you can do for your patients now. It's super easy, it's super simple, and can have a massive, massive impact. So the key nutrients I'm going to be looking at that help to fuel all of these things, but particularly the energy, the DNA, and the cellular health, are folate, iron, choline, vitamin D, and iodine. I'll go through why they are so important and what sort of dosing you should be looking at for your patients. So the key nutrients, we'll start with folate. I think it's the biggest one that everyone's heard of in regards to pregnancy, is folate, because it is essential for that DNA creation. It is one of those fundamental building blocks. We cannot sustain pregnancy without folate. It's that important. Yet we are totally reliant on our diet for adequate supply. We don't make folate. We need to be getting it through our diet. And I think we know, I guess, the fundamental reason supports the development of that neural tube, which connects that brain and spinal cord. So this is something we need in that preconception period to fuel the healthy growth of our egg and sperm, and we need it readily available to support that growth and development of that neural tube. The healthy folate levels are important to improve, I've just skipped ahead there quickly, embryo quality, and increases chances of conceiving. So having these healthy folate levels will improve your chances of creating that healthy pregnancy, and vice versa. Low folate levels are linked to subfertility and adverse pregnancy outcomes, including miscarriage, preeclampsia, and a rupture placenta as well. And folate continues to support that baby's brain development during breastfeeding. So super important for the entire reproductive process, yet we need to be getting it through our diet. And because it's a water-soluble B vitamin, it's vitamin B9, we need to be providing it every day, because it is lost from our body every day. So we need that consistent supply. So I want to look at the nutrients, and this is when I was, I guess, looking at product development and developing Zycia, which means life. Actually, I chose the name because I'm passionate about supporting life in its earlier stages. And there are a variety of different nutrients out there, and there's lots of forms of magnesium. There's whole different forms of iron. There's loads of different forms of calcium, and some pretty much stay in the tablet. Looks well and good on a label, but it's not going to be very well absorbed into your cells. What I want to know is that substance from that tablet being metabolized and absorbed into your bloodstream, because that is the most important function. We don't just want it in the tablet. We want it being utilized by the body. And folate versus folic acid. So folate is the natural nutrient that we're talking about, and it's found in food, and folic acid is a synthetic supplemental source of folate. So it needs to go through quite a number of steps in the body to be converted into the active form of folate. And this involves the MTHFR gene, which I won't go into today because that's a whole new topic. Also, vitamin B6 and B2 are involved in this cascade interaction to be able to get folic acid to be converted into its active form. And unfortunately, 50% of the population do have issues with that MTHFR enzyme, or the gene that creates that enzyme, that they struggle with this process. So not all the folic acid is going to be metabolized into our bloodstream. And unfortunately, we're then left with tons of unmetabolized folic acid, because the previous school of thought, and something, some specialists that I still work with are prescribing loads and loads. We'll just like tons more. We'll give them like 5,000. We'll give them 10 times the amount they should be having to try and get it through. Why not give a better absorbed form, so it's actually being utilized by the body? So there were a few different forms of folate. We've got folic acid, which is a synthetic form of folate. We've got calcium folinate, or folinic acid, which is one of the folates naturally found in food. So it's one of my favorites. And then we've got the active form, which is methylated folate. So you can see here where the different forms lie. So we've got that folic acid, which needs those 4 steps to be converted into active folate. We've got calcium folinate, or folinic acid, which is found in food and only requires 1 step to be converted into the active folate. And then we've got active folate itself. Now, you might think, okay, well, we'll give everyone active folate. That's the best way to go. Well, I just caveat that by saying that it is sometimes too active for some people. Food, again, I think nature knows best, and that provides folinic acid. So that's the safest one to be giving people. If we give them a too activated form, this can unfortunately cause side effects of over-methylation, so too much methyl group. So I like to give a combination of folic acid. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It still has a place and a role, but we want to be giving around 200 milligrams and 300 milligrams of calcium folate is my preferred to get that 500 recommended of folate. I do use methylated folate when it is necessary for my patients, and I do look at that MTHFR gene and how well they're metabolizing it and what their metabolic status is. So it definitely does play a role, but I find folinic acid and folic acid are a good combination for most people. But unfortunately, most prenatals will just provide a big whack of the synthetic form. So the recommended daily intake, as recommended by Australian and New Zealand guidelines, is 600 micrograms in preconception and pregnancy and breastfeeding. Now, the recommended dose, TGA, Australian Therapeutic Goods Association, will only allow 500 micrograms within a prenatal supplement, unless it's a scheduled product, which I know some of them are a scheduled product. Again, I recommend 300 micrograms of folinic acid. And why I recommend 200 micrograms of folic acid is because under that level, or above that level, is when we can find unmetabolized folic acid. And look, the jury's still out on the research, but there is some theory and some emerging research that unmetabolized folic acid could be detrimental and harmful to our body, which kind of makes sense. We've got this thing in the body that the body can't process. So I like to keep it under 200 for the folic acid and give them the more activated form of folinic acid. So that's folate, and we really need to look at what forms they are and make sure they're being metabolized. So good prenatal will help with this. Now, choline, unlike folate, this is one that a lot of people haven't heard of. And there are a number of reasons for that. Most of our nutrients as we know them today, our vitamin A's, our vitamin C's and E's, they came about, or we understood their mechanism and how important they were in the 1940s. Choline was really discovered for its benefits in 1998. Now, I don't know about you, but 1940s were before my time. But 1998, might be a bit hazy now, but I was definitely there. So choline is relatively new. So it may not even be in some nutrition textbooks if they're before 1998. And they may be before some of our specialists were even studying. So we really want to be looking at this newer nutrient and this evolving research, because the other reason I guess we don't know as much about it is those nutrients we're talking about before are classified as essential. We don't produce them in the body. Choline we do. We manufacture choline in our microbiome, in our gut. So we actually produce a small amount, and so it was thought that, okay, well, we produce it. We don't need to worry about supplementing or getting it in our diet because our body makes it. The problem with that is it doesn't necessarily make enough, and we know it makes it because we cannot sustain life without it. It is that important that we need to be able to make some to be able to sustain life. But when we're talking about creating healthy eggs, healthy sperm, creating a new life, again, we don't want just this baseline. We want optimal. We want an abundant supply to help to fuel this growth and development. So choline is a nutrient I'm particularly passionate about getting more awareness around, because it plays a critical role in healthy brain development. It's essential for normal neural tube closure. So we think about folate. I think everyone knows folate, but choline, a higher dietary intake of choline is associated with a reduction in having a child with neural tube defects. So it works hand in hand with folate. So we really should be taking choline within a prenatal supplement as well as our folate. Choline status in the first half of pregnancy is associated with cognitive development in the infant. And unlike a lot of nutrients, choline requirements increase during breastfeeding to fuel that amazing brain growth and development that's happening. However, studies show that up to 90% of the population are not reaching adequate levels. So that's a huge amount because of this lack of awareness of choline. We're not reaching levels. There is so much evolving research around choline, and I interviewed Professor Marie Cordill. She's from the Cornell University in New York, doing amazing research. A lot of these papers down the bottom are her papers. And so if you jump onto my website and you want more information on this, go to my podcast section and look up this study with Professor Marie Cordill. She's just amazing. I'd love to pick her brain, which I kind of did during the episode. But the studies are linking choline to improvements in Down syndrome dysfunction, reduce risks of schizophrenia, reduce risk of Alzheimer's disease. This is later in life. Again, you're setting your foundations up for the best start in life and preventing, these diseases later in life, and improve learning, memory, and cognitive function in our children. I love this quote from Gerald Weissman, editor-in-chief of the FASEB Journal. The importance of choline cannot be overstated as we continue to unravel the role it plays in human health and development. So I think that really sums up where we are. We're continuing to unravel, but we can't overstate the importance that it is playing in this reproductive process. And because of this, the American Medical Association announced its recommendations to include choline in all prenatal vitamins. Now, if you're in Australia like me, or New Zealand like Kathy, then that hasn't reached our shores, and a lot of prenatal vitamins that are on the counter, over the counter, will not provide choline. So it's really important to not look at the front of the packet. I always teach people, look at the back of the packet, what is in the formula, and again, what form of nutrients are in there as well, and are they actually going to be able to reach your bloodstream, not just be listed on a label. So look for choline in your prenatal supplements you're recommending to your patients. So an adequate intake, and why it's called an adequate intake, not an RDI or recommended daily intake, is because of that natural production that we have. So they call it an AI instead. And preconception, we want 425 milligrams. During pregnancy, that increases to 440 milligrams. And again, it leaps up in breastfeeding because of that brain growth and development. So 550 milligrams. So I recommend a dose of around 300 to 500 milligrams per day. You can get this from dietary sources, and I usually recommend 300 in a supplemental source to make sure you're getting a baseline of choline alongside healthy dietary sources. And I talk all of these through in my Your Fertile Pantry program and give people the supplement and the dietary recommendations, because I'm talking about supplements today because it's a nice, easy thing you can recommend for your patients. It does not replace our dietary sources. We still need those beautiful dietary sources as well. So another key nutrient is iodine. Now, iodine is particularly related to the thyroid, which is super, super important, as you would know, for creating healthy embryos, for follicle stimulating hormone, for the progression of that healthy pregnancy. Because iodine is stored in the thyroid, and in pregnancy, the thyroid is particularly active. It produces around 50% more thyroid hormone than we normally do. So we need to fuel that production, which iodine does fuel that production of our thyroid hormone. So to produce enough thyroid hormones to support the mother and fetus, the mother needs to increase her iodine intake during this time. Oh, sorry, backwards there. So if iodine intake is inadequate before pregnancy, the mother's stores may run low and be inadequate to support that unborn baby in the later stages of pregnancy. Again, I like to fuel that tank. Let's fill that tank before we get pregnant so we can help to support that in the later stages of pregnancy as well. So healthy maternal iodine levels improve that neurodevelopment. So again, related to the brain development, as was choline. And studies have shown iodine deficiency to unfortunately be prevalent in pregnant women across Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. So I think we think of it as something that is not related to the developed nations, but we do have a high prevalence of iodine deficiency. So it is something that we want to be making sure we are getting enough of during these really critical stages. Because iodine deficiency during pregnancy is the most common cause of preventable intellectual impairment worldwide. So something as simple as a nutrient we can get through our diet can have that much of an impact. Also during breastfeeding, iodine is a mineral in breast milk that is essential for the infant's thyroid as well. Iodine concentrations are highest in colostrum and declining gradually as lactation progresses. So those initial stages are super important, and the colostrum was naturally going to be high in iodine, but we need the mother to have sufficient stores to be able to fuel those high levels in the colostrum. The World Health Organization, along with Australian and New Zealand guidelines, strongly support iodine supplementation during pregnancy, and it's actually a TGA or Therapeutic Goods Association mandate for all Australian prenatal supplements to provide the recommended daily intake of iodine. Now, the recommended daily intake is 220 micrograms in the preconception and pregnancy period. Now, there's some conflicting literature on this. This is Australian, New Zealand guidelines. Other places in the world say 150. There are some saying 250, but it's in that zone. And again, I think the variability in the recommendations, what I like to do in my patients is check their levels. It sounds really amazing, but the RDIs are not going to touch the sides if you come to me deficient, which if your TSH is above 2.5, I'll be looking at iodine, because we need iodine to help to make thyroid hormone. And if your TSH is high, then you may not be making it well enough. And iodine's a fundamental reason for that. So before we throw them on thyroxine, let's find out the why. I'm always wanting to know with my fertility patients, why is that? It's not a deficiency of medication. Let's find out why that is low. And so I like to check my patients' levels, and they may need higher levels than this if they are deficient. So again, we want to fill that tank. We want to get their healthy stores right so that we can fuel that healthy growth and development all the way through pregnancy and postpartum. I had a lovely message from a patient who actually said that. He said, she went from fertility struggles to making pregnancy a breeze. You had a wonderful pregnancy postpartum, and that's what I'm wanting to achieve. That's why I'd love to get people, instead of 7 failed cycles from their IVF clinic, referred over to me, to get people to understand the importance of that preconception care and filling that tank to be able to provide those nutrients all the way through pregnancy and breastfeeding. So vitamin D is another key nutrient that is super, super important. It's known as a prohormone. It's made in the skin, and it works like a steroid hormone. It's involved in the regulation of over 2,000 genes and is linked to many health conditions, including infertility and pregnancy complications. It facilitates the transfer of calcium, which is obviously really important for that bone growth and development, and adequate vitamin D is needed for proper muscle function as well. And low levels during pregnancy are also linked to weakened lungs and increased wheezing symptoms when they're 5. So again, this plays a role in the development of our children and their disease progression later in life. It's also reduced muscle function in the mother, and it may affect contractions. And it's been shown that women who are vitamin D deficient are more likely to have a cesarean birth or need that cesarean birth. And it's believed because of those strength of contractions. And it's one of the few deficiencies that you pass on to bub. A lot of the other deficiencies, like calcium, your bub will leach calcium out of your bones if it needs to. We don't want that to be happening, but that's what will happen. But vitamin D deficiency, you can pass that deficiency on. It's also linked to a higher level of complications, including gestational diabetes, preterm birth, and infection as well. And it's also a normal component of breast milk. Daily maternal vitamin D supplementation in that 200 to 2,000 IU range produces milk concentrations that are inadequate. So we might think that's a lot, but that's inadequate to give the baby enough, and especially if there's pre-existing vitamin D deficiency. So breastfeeding alone is not enough. We need more vitamin D to fuel that breast milk. And breastfeeding mothers who take vitamin D should be giving their infants. So this is something that I do often supplement to the infant directly of that vitamin D. Otherwise, they need quite high doses. So maternal vitamin D doses of 4,000 IU, that may help to have those breast milk levels to be enough. And of course, because it's a fat-soluble nutrient, look at the weight of the mother as well. They may need more. Again, comes back to blood tests. I like to look at their levels and see what they are. But 1 in 4 Australians are vitamin D deficient. And this is based on levels below 50. I like to see them at 100. So it's increasingly common, found in 80% of pregnant mothers and their infants, even those already consuming prenatal multis. So again, we really need to boost our levels. Now, our RDIs still don't reflect those changes. So 400, 600, 600, I'd be bumping that right up depending on their levels. And I've seen in studies up to 20,000 IU used. I don't go near that dose generally, but I have used for up to 5,000, even 10,000 in some people who really need it, because it's so, so important. Now, iron, I'll quickly touch on. The main thing I want to get across with iron is, yes, we know how important it is. We know how important it is within pregnancy for growth and development, but is it causing constipation? Is it causing gut issues? Then it's not being absorbed, is it? It can't be. It's sitting in the gut causing problems. So ferrous sulfate is one of the commonest, most cheapest, rawest forms of iron, and it's very commonly prescribed, but it will bind you up and cause lots of problems. So I like to give it in the form of an amino acid chelate, which has already been broken down into the form the body can recognize and absorb. So that's the main thing with iron, is look at the form and also look at the dose. Iron is a heavy metal that's not easily excreted from the body. The upper safe limit, as recommended by Australian New Zealand guidelines, is 45 milligrams per day. And unfortunately, there are plenty of supplements way above this in a really cheap raw form. It's going to bind you up and cause problems. So we really want to be taking a lower dose again that's absorbed into your system. It just makes sense. So recommended intake preconception is 9 milligrams. I do find some women need more than that, depending on their levels. Pregnancy 27 and breastfeeding 9. Again, check their blood levels. I love to see ferritin probably around the 30 to ideally 50 mark to get that tank full. And it's actually best absorbed taking it every second day. So if you're having trouble increasing your patient's levels, it may seem counterintuitive, but we have a mechanism called hepcidin, which blocks iron uptake because it can be toxic. And that happens every 48 hours. So by taking it every second day, we can actually get better absorption and more increase in our iron levels. So I guess how I can help your patients if they want more, we've got my Neonatal Nutrients prenatal supplement. This is through preconception, pregnancy and breastfeeding. My Your Fertile Pantry program, which is a group program I run, which covers all of the 5 key aspects of that DNA growth and development. And I also have a Facebook group where I go live once a month answering questions about fertility and early pregnancy health. So I'll just go through where you'll find those details. So Neonatal Nutrients is zycia.com.au. You'll find that one. My Your Fertile Pantry program is yourfertilepantry.com/join. And there's a wait list on that at the moment because I'm currently running the program. So doors are closed, but we'll be opening again February next year. And my Facebook group where they can join and be on a call like this with me and get their questions answered. So that's Conceive Baby with Tasha Jennings if you're looking in the Facebook groups. But you can find all of that at my website. So I hope that was helpful, Kathy. I was well aware I'm getting carried away here and I've realised the time is running away.
Look, that's just so valuable. And yeah, like it's, yeah, you're such a encyclopedia of knowledge on these things, which is so good. And it's really great with having you go through those particular sort of key nutrients as well. And yeah, I mean the thing with the iron supplementation particularly, I know that it's really common that you know the levels get checked around that sort of 24, 26 weeks. And man, I personally, as a case loading midwife, I would always check women right at the very first time I saw them.
Good.
You know, because it's about, you know, attacking it from the beginning, but so often women were incredibly low.
Yeah.
And like just so poorly equipped at the beginning, but having that comparison of what their iron was at the beginning and then what it is, you know, by 24 sort of 26 weeks is so powerful to know that difference. And I'm a naturopath, but having that basic information, I mean, I would explain it to women that, like, you know, that they talk about as long as you're sort of over 20 or 30 and your ferritin studies that you're not depleted, and we'd both be going, oh, that's a terrible space to be at the beginning of a pregnancy, you know, that's not going to be. But you know, when you get somebody, say for example, who comes into the pregnancy at 40, technically not depleted, but you know that she's, you know, that's not a great place to be started. But if we can address it at 40, and then by the time that she's at 26 weeks, she's at 35, we kind of go, well, you know, you've been doing pretty good for keeping. This is, you know, you're going to need to keep doing, because the baby's getting bigger, so you're going to have bigger needs. But the thing that's so powerful is when you have a woman who maybe comes in at, I don't know, 120, and you think, well, that's not too bad for in comparison to most of the women will see. That's pretty good. Still actually only okay from a naturopathic perspective, but pretty good from a population perspective. But at 120, and then you see that it's checked at 24, 26 weeks and it's at 35, you go, holy heck, woman, you have nowhere near been keeping up with your needs. And so we're both of those recordings are saying 35. But one went from 40 to 35 and one went from 120 to 35. So it's having a baseline at the beginning. So for all of those, you know, our birth practitioners out there, please be checking the stuff at the beginning of the pregnancy.
Yes, definitely.
Right? You know, like, don't just wait till that, you know. And actually, I'm going to ask that question. So iron is one that is quite commonly checked, or well, it's commonly checked when there's symptoms that there's, you know, there's iron deficiency. I've you know, I'm not breathing well and I'm so tired, and you know, but you put all those symptoms down to being pregnant anyway. But what with the other vitamins and minerals and whatnot you've been talking about today, would you be recommend those that are not naturopaths but they are maybe, you know, case loading birth practitioners, what of these would you be relevant that you should be, that, you know, that it should be getting checked right at the beginning of the pregnancy apart from iron?
I love to check folate, vitamin B12, iron, and I also check fasting homocysteine, which is, I guess, one all the specialists I work with know I like to see it, so they check it for me. But it's one that's not always checked. And why I like to see that is because folate is going to be high if you've just taken a folic acid supplement in your bloodstream. It's high. Is it getting to your cells and being metabolized? That we don't know. And so homocysteine helps to tell us whether the folate's being properly metabolized. And there's literally literature showing that high homocysteine levels are going to cause issues in a pregnancy. So I want to know their homocysteine as well, because the folate blood test is not necessarily accurate to whether we're utilizing that folate. It just shows that it's there. Yeah. Okay. So they're the fundamental ones.
I know we're over time here, but I'm almost thinking that I feel like we've got another webinar from that topic.
Absolutely. Yes.
For the newly pregnant woman who has not done any kind of preconception healthcare, what are the tests that should be done at the beginning of the pregnancy to try and set her up for the rest of the pregnancy? Maybe we could do another one on that.
I would love to do that. It's so important because, as you said, they often check them, and second trimester is when they can plummet, and I've seen them plummet from high to low. And so I like to check them at, you know, reasonably frequent intervals during the pregnancy so that we can, you know, prevent that drop off and prevent an iron infusion, you know, later in pregnancy. So yet knowing them, as soon as they fall pregnant, I send them off for bloods straight away.
Okay.
So
I think
that's a baseline.
Address that topic very specifically.
Yeah.
A webinar, and and this is great. Okay. This is really a end of our webinar conversation that we are having, but like so we will wind things up here, but look, thank you so much for those of you that came in live. I know that a lot of you watch these webinars down the track, but yeah, it's fabulous to have you back here again, Tasha, and we've got lots more that we can be talking about, that's for sure.
We
So
sure do.
yeah, we will just stop the recording here, but thank you everybody, and thank you, Tasha.
Thank you.